Hello, Secret Keepers. Danny and I thought we had a very novel idea, a podcast about game design and the business behind it. Well, it looks like great minds think alike because today's guest, Tim Broadwater and Michael Schofield, had the same idea and beat us to the punch with their own podcast, Design Thinking Games. We are going to talk with both of them about their game habits, podcasting habits, and why you should be listening to both of our shows for a well-rounded gaming media diet. That and so much more on today's episode of the Moth Studios Super Secret Podcast. Shh. Please don't tell anybody about it. Welcome back, Secret Keepers. I'm your host, Recording Space Invader, Joel Watts, joined as always by
Danny, looking into getting my locks changed after last week's violation on the air. That was really inappropriate, Joel.
And if you want to learn more about that violation, watch us on YouTube, please. If you're an audio listener, you're missing out. But today, we are joined by two people who have a very wonderful podcast called Design Thinking Games Podcast. Tim Broadwater. I feel like I'm saying that wrong for some reason. Tim Broadwater and Michael Schofield. Did I get that right?
You got that right. Happy to be here.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Hey, we're very happy to have the two of you. You're kind of returning the favor after we went on your show, but we'll talk more about that later. We're also going to be talking to Tim and Mike about designing games, thinking games, and playing games. But before we start the interview, we got to get to know you better with the question of the week. So today's question of the week, I hope it's broadly applicable, but move over astrology. No thanks, alignment chart. The real personality sorting question for podcast lovers and makers. Would you rather listen to an NPR clean production style show or an FM ruckus morning zoo show? It's sound beds versus sound boards. What do you say, gentlemen? Tim, why don't you start?
Definitely NPR. I get annoyed by constant sound effects.
Yeah, while hilariously our show is just full of annoying sound effects, definitely NPR as well.
Do you have a favorite style or a favorite show in that genre? Because they usually tend to be documentary style shows or very, deep researched.
Yeah, I actually, I'm a big fan of Freakonomics, actually, another podcast plug. And it is just very much audioscape and not any kind of extra bangs and whistles or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. I'm listening to Articles of Interest right now, which may or may not be NPR itself, but it's in that kind of like genre. And it's about like the history of clothes and fashion, which is something I wasn't super sure. I was surprised to find that I was like totally into it.
Oh,
That
yeah.
sounds cool.
I mean, anything that involves history and like is a very, crucial building block of humanity. Like, we've worn clothes as long as we've had recorded record. I mean, there has to be something more going on. Wars have been fought, I'm sure, over, textiles and productions and material.
Yeah, totally. It's really quite pretty interesting. The most recent series they're doing, and I think it's like an episode a month. It's one that kind of like trickles out. Is really about like why we even wear clothes, and is trying to really get underneath like that skin, so to speak, about that. Like how do you navigate the world if you were naked? It's kind of a weird and awkward question, but it's interesting to consider that it's possibly functionally biologically impossible. It's so deep in our bones.
I like that. Maybe that could be the next question of the week. How would you navigate the world if you were naked? Yeah.
There you go.
I think I'd have a pretty bold answer about that one. So wait,
sure.
I'm writing this down for myself. You said that was called Articles of Interest?
Yeah, Articles of Interest. I think they also do the whole newsletter podcast thing. So every so often they just have a written document as well. Super fascinating.
Wow.
Love it.
Yeah, I think that I might actually subscribe to that because it sounds like right up my alley. History plus fashion. I love it. And Freakonomics, I definitely had a Freakonomics era. I haven't listened to it in a while, but I love that book and the documentary that went along with it.
Yeah, I would recommend, if you've not heard the podcast episode of Freakonomics that explains the economic reason why people break out in fistfights at Chuck E. Cheese, or it's an episode.
I got to watch that. I'm into
Yeah.
it.
And I was when you said break out into fist fights, I thought you were going to say Waffle House.
Oh, no. What I like about it, it's probably the same thing. There's like this educational or didactic quality to the entertainment. So like textiles and history, I love economics is something I know literally nothing about. So I just find listening to the podcast fascinating to find out this is how this works, or this is why this happened, or this is, and it's the economicist. I don't know. Economist, yes, explaining it. So yeah.
Yeah. What is the name of the host of that show? Is it still the same host?
I think so. It's always been the same host, I thought.
Yeah, it's the same too. It's like Stephen Levitt and oh man, I can't the other person off the top of my head. I'm 99% sure on Stephen.
Yeah, I think Stephen Levitt. I'm pretty sure he had another show with like some thinker of some sort. It was just like the type of show where they just answered a core question every episode. But I remember him bringing up the saying that his mother had that actually kind of changed my perspective on a few things. His mother's saying was, enough is a feast, or something like that. Enough is a feast. The idea being like, if you have enough to eat, you've had a feast. You don't need more than enough. And I was like, thought that was very poetic. So I always thank him, like that lives rent free in my mind, and it's served me well.
Yeah, I think it's Stephen Dubner and Stephen
Dubner.
Levitt, two Stevens.
Yeah, even Stephen.
That can't be it, right? This is not like what we want to burn our minutes together, like staring at. But boy, that sounds. They're both Stevens.
It sounds right to me.
At worst, that's for sure.
Yeah, serious. Is one a PH and one a V? Or are they both one or the other?
PH and a V. One's the economist. One's the host of the show.
Cool. Excellent. Well, like we said, burning minutes. Danny, do you have an answer for this? Which one are you going?
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't really put myself in either of these camps. I like the conversation more than anything, I think, like the interview type stuff. Like there's a podcast I really like called Conversations with Tyler. Speaking of different episode or different shows that feature economists, that's a really good one as well. He definitely has some really interesting guests, but I would say I'm definitely more on the sound bed side of things, the NPR side of things. I like the sound design can take you someplace else. I've always been fascinated with sound design, and yeah, like the whole morning zoo thing, I find to be irritating, I would say.
Agree.
Well, I stand alone, and I'm an irritating person, I guess, because I love me some soundboards. I just like, I mean, let's face it, I like funny but dumb people giving bad advice to call in people, like to call in to callers. I like the comedy element of it, and I don't like an aggressive use of a soundboard, but I think like when it's used properly, it can be like the funniest, like a very funny thing that coheres a show together around it. So, but I think this is kind of maybe a recent development. Maybe I just got kind of over the really well produced and talking very quietly and intentionally into microphones, and you can hear that click in the back of the voice. I had too much of that because I've been a huge podcast fan for over a decade. So I think maybe I just wanted to go back to that like raw energy. But yeah, I've been just watching a lot of listening to like mostly comedians and comedian style shows recently. And like I said, call-in advice is a classic genre, especially when the people aren't experts who are giving the advice.
Nice. I actually just associate the morning shows with that kind of sound that you're talking, soundboard. And I think I would guess 40% of their purpose is to wake you up and keep you. And so maybe that's why. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, Tim.
Half wake you up, half find out if your spouse is cheating on you. That's the two core purposes of the morning show.
Yeah, and what to do if your spouse is cheating on you, as prescribed not by a lawyer, not by a priest, but by some guy whose sole goal in life was to be on the radio.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's very revealing. It's 3 against 1 on this episode, so please get my back, folks. And don't keep your answers a secret. I am now in the minority, but I know out there are people who are sound board enthusiast just like myself. So why don't you go onto YouTube or wherever you get your podcast and leave us a comment or a review and tell us which one you prefer, these, the Morning Zoo or the NPR produced. And your answer might be featured on a future episode. And while you're at it, why don't you go ahead and subscribe? Because Danny says for every 5 subscribers we get, I'll spend 5 seconds tickling a python from the inside while counting the mice.
Yeah.
At least I won't be
accurate.
alone. Yeah.
Yeah, you won't be. There'll be mice there.
Okay. Well, Tim, let's get back on track here. Tim, Michael, this is our first time doing 2 interviews at once, so hopefully we can navigate this. And gentlemen, y'all obviously know each other well, so I'm sure you know how to take turns and play off each other. But we always like to start with y'all's origin story, and I'm just going to ask both of y'all together in this round. Did you two grow up playing games? Were you in a gaming household?
Tim, you need to take this as you certainly outrank me in age.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
His memories are fading as we talk. He needs to
I'm sorry,
get exposed
I
on.
came here through the ageism. What is it? I grew up poor, so essentially I made a lot of games and played in the forest and outside. So, but I worked very, very hard to get into gaming, and so I would say I was probably a video gamer first. And I remember very specifically in elementary school having an Intellivision. And if you don't know what an Intellivision is, it predates the Atari, and or it actually was a peer of Atari for a time period, kind of like the
Sega to
Nintendo.
Atari is
So, yeah, I would say definitely. I grew up creating games more as a kid in the country, and then I got into video games really early on.
What was what are some of your favorite early video games? Because this definitely predates my game playing a bit.
The best Intellivision game is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which was an Intellivision game where you actually have to move a little person through mountains and do something, and you can kind of, if you search for Intellivision Dungeons and Dragons, you'll find what it looks like. But they also had a lot of, Spy Hunter, Sub versus Sub, Triple Action. Triple Action, you played against another player and you were both planes, or you were trying to shoot each other, or you were both tanks trying to shoot each other, or both subs. So it was really like way better games than Atari, but Atari got all the advertising for some reason. So
Yeah, I get that. I get that very much. I'm just trying to imagine what the graphics on this look like in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I'm just imagining a lot of green with a brown line to be your path, and then your guy's 3 pixels tall and maybe has a smiley face.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much, it looks like the Intellivision logo. So if you actually type in or look up the Intellivision logo, it is a very pixelated guy running, and that is essentially the graphics. So think Pitfall, think E.T. on Atari. Very similar graphics to the Atari.
Okay, cool. Good to know. I feel like history's sort of squashed the Intellivision a little bit. Atari gets all the shine for the pre-Nintendo Revolution home video game console.
The controllers were amazing. They actually had these vertical controllers with a round dial pad, and you had 2 side buttons on each one, and then you had a 1 through what you see on a phone, like a 1 through 9 or 0 and 2 symbols. That was the controller.
Oh my gosh. So how would it work? What would you use the numbers for?
So you put in a different cartridge, and then you have this weird kind of controller with a touch pad, and then you actually have all these different numbers and then side buttons, and each game would come packaged with just the cartridge and a television cartridge, but it would also have instruction manual, but then it would have it came with 2 plastic inserts that basically look like what you put a TCG card in. You would slide that into the controller, and it was a custom graphics for that game, and it would tell you, hey, if you hit 7, this is shooting an arrow, or if you hit this is firing your sub or flying. And so you literally had this little piece of plastic that went over the controller for each game, and it would change the 9 or 12 buttons into what that game did. So
That's really cool.
That actually is it's almost like it's almost like it was so far ahead of its time, because that's like what you would think you could do with a PC. And I know, like, back in the day, we envisioned like it'd be so cool if you had a keyboard that changed the icons based on what game you were playing. You know, when I was a PC gaming kid, and it sounds very much like that concept. It's really cool.
Yeah, I will send you an image in the chat. But yeah,
Thank
it
you
is
very much. Yeah. Hey, Will, put it right there. I'll send it to you, and you just put it right up there so we can see at
Ooh.
home.
I like the way that looks. Look
Awesome.
at that wood grain.
Oh yeah, you want that sedan, or what is it? The car that used to have the wooden
A PT Cruiser.
You're thinking of like a station wagon.
station
Yeah.
wagon.
Oh
too,
yeah, the station wagon.
See, that looks so much cool. You know, that looks closer to the the Famicom from the NES in Japan. It reminds me more of that than anything I've ever seen from Atari. So I think they were on the right path. I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo was actually inspired more by this console. So you did that. You created and you played your own games and created games. What about you, Michael?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be an only child in a relatively like upper middle class home in like the mid to late '80s. So while Tim was slumming it in the backwoods, but like my memories are sort of like erratic here in that I did have like an original Nintendo Entertainment System. I remember in our basement we had a Virtual Boy. This is one. This is kind of my archaic console of choice. Where I don't know if folks remember or even knew this existed, but I think it was like late '80s, early '90s. Virtual Boy was kind of a red interface virtual reality, and you would think of like giant like night vision goggles, and you would mount it on like a little tripod. It had a controller. And you would put your face against it, and I think there was like there's like a platformer inside of it, like a Mario game or something, and it was largely like 3-dimensional, but it was all just kind of like in red hues, and you know, so I had a ton of these kinds of experiences. My first big purchase of my own with like money I made from like chores or like mowing lawns was Mortal Kombat 1 for the Sega, which I bought at a pawn shop in Lansing, Michigan, and the pawn shop was called Dicker and Deal. And the dude gave it to me for like 20% off because I pulled the money out of my own pocket, and he's like, "Hey, like I'm gonna give this to you on a discount." And like it was such a cool, memorable experience. And then of course, you know, this Mortal Kombat game had like blood codes and like some really cool stuff there.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm sort of like jumping around. This is whereas like Tim is very type A, I'm like type like L, and I'm just kind of like bouncing everywhere. But like my dad also had like an old Packard Bell PC like in the basement, and we had Wolfenstein 3D for the old Packard Bell. Nice. And this is like the first Wolfenstein game. It's a first person shooter. You know, Wolfenstein had a reemergence in like the mid-aughts, but you know, so I've been fortunate enough to kind of like bounce through all of this. But I was an only child, so I played a ton of games. I entertained myself too. Like I went out in the woods. I grew up in the Midwest, but it's just a cornerstone of who I was. And then it's hard to say like early RPGs. In like in the late 90s, we got the internet, and back then, you know, I would jump in the old 1997, 1998 Yahoo chat rooms, which is a skeevy place to be. But we had we had this place called like, it's like the teens section, and so all the teens would go there. And then there was like
The teens.
there's a room. So in IRC terms, you'd call it like a channel or whatever. But there was a room in the Yahoo chat in the teen section called the Vampire Tavern, and this is where everyone would go and like role play as vampires. Ooh. And it's kind of like out of this kind of like weird kind of batshit early internet experience where I got introduced to like the early old world of darkness and started playing Vampire the Masquerade, and dovetailed into a decade of being in like a wallflower goth, you know, because of that. So I kind of like run the gamut, largely video games. And then as I entered my teens, I dovetailed into RPG systems and stuff.
Okay. Well,
feel like
first of all,
those-
I just want to say, first of all, I think we got the Rosetta Stone for every other question I was going to ask you, Michael. So we're pretty good there. The Yahoo Vampire the Masquerade role playing, I think I get it all now. But that's a really amazing. It covers the gambit. I also had a Virtual Boy, so I remember how I think we played it really for one night because we all, like myself and my brothers, played it, and it was as though our eyes just were like, no, please never put your head in that again.
Yeah, my memory of it is there's like two cornerstones to this memory. I had it, it was there, and I only have a memory of like playing it once. Like
Yeah.
I don't think I went back to this a ton. I remember where it was, like on the table.
Yeah.
I don't remember a ton of experiences with it.
What if it's like the same memory for me as well? And I'm almost wondering if like this is just like, what is it, like the Mandela effect or something, like where everybody who had a Virtual Boy had the same experience with it.
I remember using it. I thought it was it would hurt my eyes. So
Yeah.
That must have been it. That must have been the common denominator, that it just like was painful and weird and not usable,
So, well, I have to ask, you said you're a big console gamer, it seems like. What was, at the time of growing up, what was your favorite console? Which one do you identify the most with?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite console, like of the time, is probably like the Sega Genesis. Not because it's good or had the best games, but because it was my coming of age console, right?
Yeah.
And so specifically, of course, like the original Mortal Kombat and then Mortal Kombat 2, and it had like a slate of like fighting games. But my friend and I would call each other on our cordless phones, and we would each play Road Rash. Which was like a motorcycle racing game where as you race by the, your opponents, I suppose, you would hit them with like chains and stuff, and you would like knock them off the bikes. And that was our early multiplayer, right? We're like, and we're just kind of like pretending to be in the same like lanes.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these memories of me are like like in my room. Like I said, I was an only child, like on the phone with my buddy playing Road Rash. And then and then we had like the 32X. Like, so I have a lot of Sega games here. These are my first purchases, and so, I mean,
cool.
I guess, the consoles have certainly gotten much better, but that's my nostalgic, benchmark.
that's when I was actually in middle school. So I was more of a Nintendo fanboy. And so I think I've had every Nintendo system except the 64 because it's garbage, in my opinion. Hot take. But Super Nintendo and GameCube, phenomenal. Wii U. I thought Wii U was a game changer, but had them all.
It was the John the Baptist to the Switch's Jesus Christ. It was the precursor to getting the table set for the true game changer, which is the Nintendo Switch. I took some damage there because the Nintendo 64 was the Sega Genesis for me, in the sense of Michael was saying it was his coming of age console. I think the N64 was like that first time I ever stepped into 3D. I mean, if you told me the N64 in retrospect was essentially just a $300 device that allowed you to play Super Mario 64 and Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, I'd say it's still worth it.
Garbage. I disagree.
It was in
I
that
gotta
moment that Tim
disagree.
realized he did not like Joel.
Like hard exit. No, like
The controllers
Super
are
64.
horrible. Like the hold, like those.
Oh,
Giant
I will never argue for the controllers. We actually bought like third-party controllers it's the one time the third-party controllers were better because they were laid out better. I do agree on that, but it was.
I don't know. I think you
loved
guys
it.
are being. Oh, sorry.
I was just saying I loved it despite its faults. Just like
Yeah,
my
and
last
I was
girlfriend.
saying that I think you guys are being divas. That like three-legged like controller. Like I was of the similar age with the Nintendo 64. I thought it was cool. I was like, oh, look, it has a joystick.
3D
And, like,
garbage.
and some
It's 3D
triggers, and I
garbage.
don't know how you get this trigger over here. You
Well,
know, but-
I'm about to get pretty triggered, so why don't we move on to the next question? Which,
That's a sign of a
Was-
good episode, in my opinion.
yeah. We'll discuss it. Back me up in the comments. The N64 worth it or not worth it? You let the audience decide. But right now, we're going to ask because I know. So it seems like the thing that brings you two together is the classic game Dungeons and Dragons. We've already touched on the first, like a very early computer game version of Dungeons and Dragons, but when did you two start playing role-playing games, specifically Dungeons and Dragons, in your own lives?
It was middle school through high school through college until now. So
just a continuating, just continuously.
yeah,
When your schedule works
started with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
Like not even Dungeons and Dragons, not second edition, but advanced when you had the monk, and then I played through second edition. Then it got when it was like Money Hungry 3.5 and Paizo split from. Paizo took the name of the magazine from Wizards of the Coast or TSR or whatever, and they decided to split at 3.5. I went with Paizo, and I actually went the Starfinder Pathfinder side, and then.
Okay.
But I've always loved World of Darkness. World of Darkness is like my true college game that I loved, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So that answers that. 3.5 is like your exit point. Do you play 5th edition now, or are you still on Pathfinder?
I was a organized play person for Paizo, so I was a venture lieutenant is what they called it, or venture captains, and so I did community organization and playing for Paizo, Pathfinder, Starfinder, Pathfinder 2nd edition for years, and was just fully embedded in that.
Mm-hmm. I'm assuming Starfinder is the like science fiction to Pathfinder's fantasy.
Yeah, Pathfinder in space, essentially like space orcs, space dwarves, space elves. Yeah,
All you need.
All you need. And then I love all the different types of games. I think one of the ones is like if you ever played the wrestling World of Wrestling RPG, super fun. All of the World of Darkness I think appealed to me the most because it was all intercompatible. And so we ran games in college that were like, someone's a Fomori, someone's a vampire, someone's a werewolf, someone's like, and you could a wraith, and you could mix them all because it worked. And then they were ingenious, I think, World of Darkness for that. And then so much social media and games and movies and TV shows. I mean, I think kind of took it from World of Darkness, and it's kind of sad that they're in the state. I feel like it could be a much better system with organized play and so much bigger and better games, but they have this curse on them. Like all their video games just don't do well. And the last werewolf game I was super excited for, and it sucked so bad. But yeah, werewolf is definitely a shared passion, I think. And I've played 5th edition. I think 6th is coming out soon, or in the next couple of years or something. So
yeah, for Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
I think they're. It seems like they might be dropping the edition demarcation, but they are like evolving it into something else. So, I think there's going to be some new rules or some new ways of playing. And what about you, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, like so I get in kind of the same way. I sort of like fell into Dungeons and Dragons itself a little bit later because my first real rules-based RPG system was the old World of Darkness, Vampire the Masquerade. I picked up like an old book from like Barnes and Nobles, or no, it had to be Borders acquired a
Walden bookstores.
Walden Books, yeah. So at a Walden Books, there was a book companion to a late 90s soap opera style vampire TV show called Kindred the Embraced, and it was set in the World of Darkness thing. You can find it. It had one season, but I picked up like the companion for that, and then dovetailed into all of these old Vampire the Masquerade and all the Chronicles, and like all the not Vampire Chronicles, that's Anne Rice, but all of the Clan Chronicles and all these different city books. And I really started playing a lot of that. I've always preferred kind of like low fantasy. What I like about the World of Darkness is that it is the world right here. It's just what happens when the sun goes down, and there are real vampires. So you can play in your city, or you can put yourself in another city, and you can explain world events. But if there were vampires behind them, and something like that, like really kind of like appealed to me. So I played a lot of that, and I actually only came into like Dungeons and Dragons like specifically. Actually just a little bit before the pandemic when I kind of like I decided like I was like I kind of decided that I was going to become a professional DM because I saw like I like there was a certain show that was getting popular around that time, and I was like, I could do that. And then I started playing like really hardcore, and so I played a lot of 5th edition. I don't have a lot of experience with anything before that, but a lot of the way I play is with different supplements and stuff that actually tone down the high fantasy. I'm not a big high fantasy buff. I don't like dragons. I don't like fireballs. Like I want it to be like, walking around in super heavy armor, and then, oh no, you're dehydrated and you have to sit down. Like that's the kind of things that like I really like to play. And it really did start with World of Darkness. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Dungeons and Dragons, but now
No, you love dungeons.
I've
not
kind of
dragons.
backfilled into like the dungeons, and I've backfilled into like Call of Cthulhu and some of these like other like more like low fantasy or spooky noir games.
Okay.
There's definitely some crap. I agree. We also align on our perspective of high fantasy as being crap, and that generally like you have to mix it with something to make it better. Like mixing it with like, oh, it's space high fantasy, or it's alternate history, or it's like some clockwork, or like something, But high fantasy just by like, hey, I'm going to make a game, and it's going to have dwarves and elves and castles and wizards and knights, and it's like snooze fest.
Yeah, crap is a strong word, but there's a saturation point, right? And it's just like oh, hey, how many high fantasies are the same? So now the ones that really shine for us, I think, are those that do something different. Not necessarily special, but the classic like, hey, our party is going adventuring, and all of those campaigns start to feel the same when you're of like a decrepit curmudgeonly age as Tim and I.
Here's the pitch. High fantasy, but all the doors play Nintendo 64.
I don't know.
I love
about
it. They're
that.
they're literally gold farming, right? They're not even like doing real mining or anything. They're some kind of weird
Digital Minecraft.
Yeah, they're just in some sort of like capitalist slave system. Like the cave is just like a really large room in like South Korea.
Oh God. See, I think I can jive with you guys in the sense of like, I think if you're going to play high fantasy, you might as well give your character something like speaking stones and say that they have like magical internet. You might as well make it to where you're playing in a world that is sort of like our world, technologically our world, but with magic. Because if you had that level of magic, they would have figured out how to use it to make something like the iPhone for everybody.
It's
to be able to
the
have.
Arthur C. Clarke principle, right? Like all paraphrasing, but like magic is just technology we can't fathom. I don't. There's a better quote that we should totally pull and read from, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic or something like that.
There we go.
Yeah. I not to divulge, or I have like in the back of my head a D&D campaign, and one of the hooks of the campaign is like there's a Apple like corporation, and how they like sell like, I guess, a rune brick. I don't know what exactly I would call it, but like basically they just shrink down their technicians to like go in and carve runes into like intricate runes into like just a small brick the size of our phones, and then you just have a magic user charge it up, and then you have access to like cantrips and telecommunication essentially.
See, works. Capitalism, high fantasy. That can work. Tech, capitalism, that works.
Yeah.
Just don't make it lazy. I think there was a lot of, we talked about this on our podcast, but like, for example, Game of the Year a couple years ago was Elden Ring, and people were either all in or like, I don't want another high fantasy game. So it was, and I just don't make it lazy, And I'm not saying Elden Ring did it really well, but I also think that extends to any genre. That can extend to fantasy, sci-fi,
Oh yeah.
And I could give you another hot take about Star Wars, but I'll save that.
Well, maybe we could save that for a little later. I'm up for Star Wars hot takes because I've kind of fallen out of love with that series. So we can talk more about that here in a minute. Now, the main thing I wanted to get to before we move into like getting to know the two of you better as individuals is, when did you expand, I guess, to other games, other board games, if that's where you're at this point? Because if I understand correctly, you talked to a variety of game makers on your show. So when did you expand to like, I guess, other kinds of board games and other ways of playing, and what are some of your favorites that you found along the way?
I would say I've always been a gamer. So it doesn't matter if it's on a digital device or if it's a board game or a card game. Or I love LARPing. Say what you want, but like
I
I'm a
noticed
buffer
based on your podcast episode titles, I'm pretty sure you're a big LARPer.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Mike's more of a LARPer. I'm more of a buffer LARPer. Like I like heavy combat, armored combat, and doing buffer LARPer, physical stuff. And then say whatever you want, but paintball is LARPing. I mean, so so I actually like
here,
games.
folks. Hot take after hot take.
Yeah, so I like gaming from physical all the way to any medium. So I think I've always been that way. So
Okay. And do you have any favorite board games that you're still playing these days, or do you just play whatever's available to you whenever you go to game night?
I have this insane collection that every spring I slim down because I have too many board games. I got to the point with video games that there's no point pre-ordering or buying anything anymore, because time as an adult and with the GameStop trade-in value, you can just keep just play the games that you want to play, take them in and get 50% credit back and get the new games you want. And so I play so many games. There's not one that is has stuck with me forever. If you want something that's like stuck with me forever, probably Magic the Gathering is a sticker forever. Pokemon as a video game, not the card game, has stuck with me forever. And I would say, and Mike knows this a little bit, but I am always on the search for outprinted, obscure games in the horror genre. And so when I find an Etsy or Facebook marketplace, or if I'm at a con and they actually have Fury of Dracula version 4 out of print, or they have Camp Grizzly or something like that, like you can't get that shit anymore. So you have to get it, like you have to look for it. So I like those kind of, but that's more of a hobbyist collecting like games out of print. So,
that sounds like antiquing at this point.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And Michael, what about you? But I guess maybe the question should be, what are you playing like right now, or like Tim did, what are some of your just like milestones? Your like Mount Rushmores.
Yeah, totally. Like same thing. I've just I played a ton of games. So Magic the Gathering and specifically like Pokemon came out like as again when I was coming of age. Now I didn't really like jump on those. And I think for a reason that you guys have alluded to in like other media, other discourses, but like the entry point for trading card games is like can be quite expensive and hard to get into, and so I didn't really like jump on that bandwagon, and I've never quite got on there. But I played a ton of stuff. I mean, and I think, I mean, like, I don't even. It's hard to say like what they are because I play a lot. Like what I really kind of gravitate towards are, I like very involved games. I enjoy. I'm not evil, but I would prefer like a game that takes like 3 or 4 hours of like hard focus to kind of get through than one that is kind of like a sit down, have fun with your buddies. I don't know. I don't want to have fun with my buddies. I want to slay Dracula. Fury of Dracula is probably this game that I think I introduced Tim to. Like I was like, hey, there's this thing that you need to like look up, and it's like I was fortunate at the time to have bought it when it was in print, and then I no longer have it. But it's this whole idea where you are 3 to 4 Victorian vampire hunters like Mina Harker, etc., and you have to chase Dracula through like Eastern Europe.
Oh wow!
You have a day cycle and a night cycle, and so it does all these things where it's a board game. It's tactile. It feels cool. The gameplay elements are actually quite good. The balance is fine. You feel like one of you gets to be Dracula, and you feel powerful. You feel strategic, but it's also deeply. It's a role playing game, right? I mean, like you take on these roles and you go in there hard, and it's just so beautiful, right? I mean, like this is the kind of thing. This is why whatever the media of a game, whether it's a board game or video game or whatever, the fact that you can look at something like this, it's currently like in this. We just dropped into the chat for the listeners, like so. Hopefully, it's somewhere.
Yeah.
I recommend folks Google it.
Oh wow!
You can look at it and you can just like immerse yourself, not into just like the game or whatever, but like into the world of the game, and you belong. It's always been that, like it's the RPG element, like like putting on like a different hat. And I've never loved like comedy, so if I can role play it and it takes itself a little too seriously, like it's a for serious sort of game, it's great. So I don't even know what the question was, but Tim mentioned Fury of Dracula, and I want to put it on folks' radars because it's one of those things that like, you know, you sometimes find on like an Etsy or whatever, and you should get it.
I would
not because it's a collector's item, but it's good.
Yeah, I would say too, if you were asking also kind of what we're currently playing, I can definitely speak to that. I am cracked out on Lorcana. I have the cards right here.
Oh, jeez, I've heard tale.
Yeah, I am playing Final Fantasy Rebirth on PS5 right now. I'm playing Princess Peach Showtime on Switch. I play so much DBD, Dead by Daylight, that it is obnoxious and toxic. And I have a lot of board games. So,
do you know Laird perchance?
Who?
Have we talked to you about Laird? Like,
I think you put us in touch with him.
Oh, okay, cool, excellent. Just want to make sure. Like I flashback. No, but that's awesome, and also I really love this Fury of Dracula game. What you're selling me on is the fact that it's still like, even though it's like has all the components and maybe prefab characters, it's still a role playing game, which I think is very important to me and the games I want to design moving forward. Is that when you sit down at that table, you're putting on, at the very least, you're putting on a hat. You're putting on a new hat and putting yourself into a character's shoes. I don't. You know, I'm not as big on abstract games. I thought I would be more into them, but like after playing a few, it's just like, yeah, I don't know. It feels a little too much like work. It might as well be an Excel spreadsheet.
Immersion is important, and I think that's Mike. Maybe what you were alluding to is like 3 to 4 hours. Like you really, if you're sitting down to play a game, you really want to feel like you're like playing something. Like you're really wanting to be transported somewhere, not just okay, cool. I'm moving, the kittens around. I think, like it's,
I love roguelikes, so I'm definitely Dave the Diver, Moonlighter. I will sink tons and tons of hours into mindless chore work because it's relaxing for me. Yes. But then also DBD is relaxing, hanging people on hooks or getting hung on hooks and doing all that thing. And so there are certain games I go to for relaxing, and I feel there's also games that are like, oh, I really want to play this. I think like Fury of Dracula and Camp Grizzly are one of those that are like, you can't play it anymore because it's out of print, but if you do get to play it, it's pretty amazing. So
nice.
Yeah, wow. It's special. It's a moment, and the thing is that like, okay, like at the time you are not bored during that time. You are maybe escaping your problems for whatever reason you play games, but like what makes this and like kind of like other games that at least I gravitate toward great is that when everything's folded back up and put in the box, you and the other people at the table have co-created this like narrative. You guys have a story. That time when like Tim fled into Eastern Europe and raised the dead every city he went, or something like that. It's those are like those. It's the narrative after the fact that is like becomes the memory.
Yeah.
Right. And so yeah, it's the storytelling part for me. So whether it's playing an RPG or it's playing like a board game or a card game or whatever, like if it has that kind of like narrative element, like I really gravitate toward.
But you also play like a ton of Call of Duty, right? Or
me?
Not Call of Duty. I know nothing about like first person, third person shooters, but
I'm not a loser.
No. But you play a bunch of like Hell Let Loose and like all of these other games that are like.
So there's I'm not ashamed of this, but it's just so I like low fantasy. Which means like translate this to like first act for like FPSs. Like I don't like Halo jumping over huge boulders or whatever. I can't do it. I need something grounded. So there's kind of like this kind of like it's still arcadey, but there's like this military simulator called Hell Let Loose, and it's the kind of World War II game. And if you loved like Band of Brothers or something, and you want to go play Band of Brothers, this is Band of Brothers the game. Ooh. And it's such the game where like you can start running around the forest and then you hear this little whip and you're dead and you don't know why and you hate it and you're like, oh, this sucks, this is not fun at all, until you realize the only way to survive is to crawl forever. So it's just one of those things where, again, like, so Hell Let Loose is like my first person shooter of choice, and I go back to that like a lot, and I'm not sure what gets me. I love a good FPS. I love things where you have to feel like you're actually good at it. I love things that require skill.
Me too.
And yeah, so I don't in my current adult life, I don't really have like a ton of time for games, so I tend to gravitate toward things that I can sit down and complete, like
Yeah.
any of any of like the Life is Strange games or like the Telltale Walking Dead games back when those were there. Those kind of super massive games, like Until Dawn or whatever narratives. But that's almost like a function of the time I have available, and I would play
Playing
other
a
big
movie.
box RPGs if I could actually finish them. But yeah.
For sure. No, that makes complete sense. I mean, like, I also had my a love for those Telltale games because how easy they were to sit down and play, like you said. Anyways, but no, that was amazing. Y'all definitely have your gaming bona fides down. But now let's find out more about y'all outside of the gaming world. And we're going to do this. This is where we're going to take two paths really quick. First, I'm going to talk to Tim about Tim's life, and then Michael will talk about yours. Okay, so Tim, something that we've discovered about you is that you are actually an athlete, not just a gamer, which is kind of odd, but also kind of awesome. So tell us about your athleticism and what you've done with that.
Yeah, when did you find out you were a jock?
Yeah,
So, I mean,
wolf among sheep.
Mike is the goth to my jock, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. But he's also kind of a jock, and I'm also kind of a goth. So it kind of works to some degree. So I would say I've always liked games, especially physical games. You know what I mean? I remember, like, as a family, we always had lawn darts and croquet and, like, all these outside kind of games. In public school, I always was in basketball and baseball and football. And so I would say near my end of my 30s, croquet is a very cheap game, by the way. So, but I would say my latter 30s to 40s, I just wanted to really focus on my health a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I actually got to the point to where I was like losing weight and I was just like, but it wasn't at a point you can only do so much with a diet. And so I just started like working out. And then I was like, oh, I kind of am good at this. I'm actually really good at this. And so then I started like competing in training to compete in strongman. And I started doing my first strongman competition shows. And then I competed nationally in strongman, ranked in master's class 6th in the year I competed, the 6th strongest in the United States. And the Arnold is great. If you've ever been to the Arnold in Columbus, Ohio, it's like if you want all the physical games where the physical kids go to hang out and play games, they go to the Arnold, and they have like all the games that I kind of started getting into. So like I started like Highland games and like the caber toss and like doing the Scottish long hammer throws and all this stuff. And then I started doing martial arts and sumo wrestling and judo and karate and I competed nationally in sumo, and I've actually competed in karate as well. And then, it's just kind of a passion that I just kind of learned, or not a passion, but it's just something I really like. Oh, I kind of like this, and I'm good at it. And I just view it as a different type of game, I guess, or different types of gaming. So I would not consider myself an athlete in any way whatsoever.
Okay. So, very humble.
Weekend athlete, maybe, or like weekend, whatever you want to call it.
It doesn't have to be your occupation. It's just, you are an athletic person, and I'm like, definitely getting, I feel you. I felt like I found my love for my body later in life. Like, in my early 30s is when I started really, taking it more seriously. We can't spend too much time on this. It's an entire other podcast, but just really quick, what's your greatest achievement as somebody who participates in strongman and all these other,
so I have my powerlifting total's over 1,000, which it's cool. It's not that bad, but I mean, it's nice, awesome that your combined squat, deadlift, and bench is over 1,000 pounds. And so so that's kind of cool. It's not that uncommon, but a lot of people, that's a pretty good achievement. I think when in nationals, my favorite event is Atlas stones. So where you actually have to go on the ground, pick up this Atlas stone, and then pick it up and like put it over a bar. And the heaviest one I've ever done is 340 pounds. And so, so that was kind of cool. And then I've also liked doing truck and fire truck pulls and plane pulls and things like that, where you have a harness and you're just like pulling it. Like, so in that regards, those are all cool things. I don't know about greatest achievement, but definitely cool things. I definitely want to get to a place to where only 5% of people are in the world, which is you can bench press 3 plates, you can, squat 4 plates, you can deadlift 5 plates. I have all of those except the bench, and so the bench is the thing I'm working on. So
5%. I don't believe you. I feel like you mean 0.5% or something like that.
No, 5% of people in the world are only able to do that weight, and it's like 10% who can do 1 down. So if you can bench 2 plates and
I'm not
squat
even
3
at a
and
plate.
deadlift 4. Oh no, it all just takes time, of course.
Yeah,
It's like
of course.
the thing in strength and athletes is, and this is probably why people don't do it, because it's like it is the long game. You are building the strong wall, 1 brick at a time, 1 day at a time, and you do not see the results until time passes. And I will say that once you've done like, I can feel it after so many months. After so many years, you feel it. After you hit 5 years of like, you feel it. After you hit 10 years, like the benefits of like your body are great. So.
Yeah. I can attest for that. I mean, I'm not nearly where you're at, but I am so much further than when I started, years ago, when I really went from being somebody who just did cardio at the gym to starting to lift weights. It has been a massive improvement, and I can't wait to see those 10-year results.
Yeah, I don't have
keep
Matt's
going.
biceps from Envy board games. Of course, I envy his biceps, and so but I told him once, like at Unplugged, I'm like, we're gonna have to do a TikTok where I just fireman carry you like this and I squat you.
I love it.
He said he'd be game for it, but we've just never done it. So
Okay, well, I hope I'm there. I want
Yeah, I
to be one
wanna
of the people
see that.
recording. All right. Well, that is amazing. I love hearing about this. Like I said, we could have an entire other podcast about like the games of athleticism that you participate in, because that's a different area of gaming we could go into. But really quick, Michael, let's also go into something that you're passionate about on the side. Now, you have another podcast besides the Design Thinking Games podcast. What is The Thief?
Wow. Yeah. So The Thief is ostensibly an actual play turned audio drama. It's 1 player, 1 DM. We play a low fantasy Downton Abbey style of like Dungeons and Dragons. And it is told, the first season is told over just 7 episodes, in which all of the non-player characters are fully cast voice actors. There's full sound design, full complementary of like music and background. It's theater for the mind. And so I make The Thief, this kind of a audio drama, this fantasy fiction podcast. It's one of those things that's kind of like hard to sell, like if you aren't in the like audio drama circles or whatever. But
I would say, like, if you find, Critical Role too chaotic, too many voices to keep track of, this is definitely like much more like it is like the movie to that TV show, if that makes sense. Like from what I've listened to it so far, it's a little bit more concentrated, but because of that, you get much more finer details, I believe. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean that's what it is. The goal was to take what's going on in our minds when we are sitting at a table playing a game together and make that real. So one of the things that I don't care, I mean, Critical Role like paved the way, and I've enjoyed a lot of Critical Role. I consider myself a critter, maybe lapsed in the same way a lot of people are lapsed Catholics, a lapsed critter.
Yes.
But like one of the things that I've, that I don't care for so much is ostensibly what makes it an actual play. There's actually like an academic curricula that is starting to emerge about actual plays and their role as, in the same way that you can major in film or major in art. There are areas of study around the actual play, and ostensibly the actual play is the idea that other people, you're making a production out of the game that you are playing. People are watching you play a game, and they're interacting and bonding with the players. I don't care about the players, and I don't care deeply about. I mean, I care about my players, but I don't care about like. I'm not interested in the players. I'm not interested in the game. I'm interested in the story they're telling, and every time they laugh or they misroll or something, it gets in the way. And so, the other end of the coin is like there are audio dramas which are fully cast, basically old school radio plays brought to podcast. And those are fully scripted. Mine's not fully scripted. It's improvised actual play. I just produce it to within an inch of its life.
It's a very good, like, it's like a Judd Apatow film in that situation. It's like you improv'd all the scenes, but then you like cut down all the fat.
Yeah.
Well, Judd Apatow could use some help cutting down the fat, but you've done a great job of condensing it down to the most important parts and creating the genre, the drama in the editing bay and in the in the sound design and in the voice cast. And so that's a very interesting approach to actual play. And I could go yet again. This is a podcast on its own, and maybe we should invite you back to talk more deeply about actual play podcast, especially because we're going to do our first. Well, here's a little teaser, but we're planning on doing our first actual play episode from coming up for my birthday. So we'll get more into that later.
Awesome.
But
Happy birthday! That's awesome.
Well, it's still a few months away. we're still you know how D&D is. We got to organize now to make it happen. You have to organize 3 months in advance to have one play session. So one last question for you, Michael. How did you cast your main character? That's so important. Like all these other shows, they have 4 or 5 people. It's easy to see how you could just invite your friends, your best D&D playing friends. But you had one person. How did you decide on that one person?
Yeah, I invited one of my best D&D friends that I was playing with elsewhere. So CC Wei is the editor-in-chief of the markup. Oh boy, I probably shouldn't associate her with a brand that she's not part of. I forget, but she is like a hardcore card carrying journalist with many accolades, and by dint of the work that I do, I have these kinds of people in my Venn diagram. And we started playing a regular D&D game together a long while ago, and it was just out of the blue. It's just one of those things where you have an idea and you want to make art, you should just pull off the Band-Aid and go make it. So I hit it up and I was like, hey, do you want to do this thing? Let's give it a shot. And she said yes, and she turned out to be excellent. CC is CC helped define the kind of player that I've started casting for spin-offs of The Thief and other things like that, in that she is a very thoughtful, strategic player, and she'll and I don't really know. I got super lucky with her because she plays the game. She embodies a character. She plays the game as the character. There isn't much metagaming there. And she goes in directions that I'm not certain of. Like in The Thief, I had this set up so that she would do more thieving. And she would break in and sneak around or whatever. And she decided, no, I'm going to go pretend to be a maidservant. And suddenly the entire season became this Downton Abbey, life under the stairs kind of story.
Yeah.
And it works out. It's to her character, and the story turned out better. So I just got super lucky. And now when I'm looking for other, to the point to the casting, as I look for other people, a big part is that, it sounds silly, they have to be adults who can control their schedules and their calendars and can meet at a recurring time on a frequency, because playing an actual play for people, recording it, is work. It's production. It's not for fun. There has to be an acknowledgement that you are not playing for yourselves. You are playing to tell a story, and the goal is that the story is interesting to listen to, not that you are going to win.
Oh yeah, never. D&D is never about winning. It's about having a good time and telling a great story.
And I play with a grit and glory supplement, and so even having a good time might be out of the question. I edit out a lot of the rolls, but there are a couple of times where she fumbled a rope climb, and and she really could have just fallen to her death, or she twisted her ankle, the character's ankle for a while, and that actually creates like an impeding problem. So,
But then
but the
playing
story
that
that
problem,
emerges from that is so
yeah,
good.
exactly.
Yeah,
It's the emergent story. See, that's my idea of a good time, and so maybe maybe we disagree on like what good times is. And I'm not talking about like we're all getting laid. I'm talking about like, oh, this bad thing happened to me, but now I have to figure a way around it. I have
I'm
to
with you.
incorporate it with it.
That's the fun of it. I feel
Yeah.
like I kind of like I overcompensate how not fun of a GM I am, because I feel like when people get into D&D, they're like, I'm going to slay a dragon. It's like that dragon's gonna kill you.
Yes.
you know. But the story that emerges from that is gonna be so good. And like I promise, like if people play with me, like we will make some like art out of it. It'll be really cool. It'll just take months and months to produce.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, we're going to need to move on, but I am going to throw down right now, throwing my hat into the ring for the spin-off show, The Paladin.
Ooh.
And we might have like shared some DMs about that already.
Yes, I would love to partake in this if we can. But obviously we have to figure out our schedules. Now, what we share here today is a little thing called life. No, we.
I love the Prince reference. That's great.
Thank you. Thank you. But we are both podcasters, and I wanted to talk to y'all about y'all's podcast before we need to start rushing towards the end. So y'all have a podcast called the Design Thinking Games Podcast. I guess, how did you two meet and instantly go into podcast mode? Have y'all been friends for a while, and then the podcast was just something y'all wanted to jump into?
I was trying to think of this yesterday, and I was like, when did I meet Mike? And I was like, I think it was sometime in 2014, 2012, and we met through work. We did not meet through any of our gaming passions. And so I was a guest. I was in higher education, working in user experience and software. Mike was also in higher education, I think, at some point, and working in user experience at higher ed library. And I worked UX at a library. And I cannot remember how we actually introduced or met ever. But I think the thing was like, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? Because he actually has a third podcast called Metric. And I was a guest on there for like 1 or 2 episodes. And then I think later he was like, hey, do you want to do this webinar? He's doing it through this library and this process. So I did it. It was called UX Quackery. It was like this learning webinar. I still have it on my website. And then it was like, hey, do you want to do a 10-episode stint on the Metric podcast? And it's all about user experience, kind of in design and tech and that kind of thing. And so, which is our 9-to-5 day jobs. And so we did that, and it worked. And then I think essentially, I can't remember the original meeting time, but then in 2020, when COVID happened, essentially he's like, I'm going crazy. I want to start a podcast. Are you in? And I think that was basically it. And then X amount of years into that, interviewing all these people in the game adjacent space or in the game design space or game designers or people who are LARP designers or game coordinators or whatever, we were like, I like making games. I have game ideas. And he's like, I do too. And so it's like, maybe we should make games. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but I don't remember exactly how we met specifically.
Yeah.
I don't remember initially reaching out, but I think the idea is that like we, like Tim and I both have like a chip on our shoulder. Tim's written books. We both have possibly like a workaholic stint, right? Where, and we want to be kind of like the best at what we can do in our field. And so at some point, like our circles crossed, and I was doing these kind of like higher ed like webinars because when you're in libraries at a university, I was the head of library services for a university for a few years. Sort of like publish or perish, right? You kind of got to do conferences, you got to do all of this stuff, right? And so I was teaching webinars, and they were like paid webinars, and in higher ed you don't get paid nothing. And so anyway, like me and Tim just found that we were both really good at the one thing that was kind of blowing up, at least in that kind of part of like higher ed at the moment, which was front end designed and user experience. And and we kind of like collaborated on a few things there.
Okay.
And what basically happened to get us to design thinking games, like we got bored and started doing a podcast, but like all of Metric. Metric was a podcast that is now defunct. I don't know if you can even find it, but like for a long time, like it had like a site, and I had like 7,000 listeners was my peak at the moment. But the thing is that like we basically like this, not to be a little not to be elitist, but there's
Please.
a lot of user experience and front end engineering stuff on the internet.
Yeah.
And Tim and I kind of always thought we were better at a lot of. But our takes were more correct. They were more grounded in research and thought and practice. They were more practical, and so our take was always like, "Hey, there's a lot of other like shows or a lot of content, but we're the ones that we're going to make the content that the other content creators listen to, right?
Yeah.
Like we are going to be the source of their truth."
That's
And that worked out for a while. And what kind of happened is that we ran out of things to say. Like we said, we did it we've been doing this thing for like several years, and the industry doesn't change. It just kind of recycles, right?
Yes.
You get like new people and they have the exact same problems that you had like 10 years ago or whatever. And they're just no longer interesting to solve. And so we were like,
I think
we're
that's-
gamers and
Metric kind of ended at some point, and then I think in 2020 when we talked, we were like, "Hey, we want to do something that sticks around, and we want
Yes.
something." We have an
also
idea
not
here.
about work. Like, we were kind of like
Yeah.
screwed. We're a little tired of work, So
So we had a
so
theory,
what's the
which
other
is
thing?
like people who are other people like us who are into user experience and design. Do they like games too? And then we started interviewing UX people on the podcast and game people intermixed. 'Cause
Yes.
play testing and user testing are very similar. The methodologies for developing a product are very similar in regards to user data versus player data. And then
level. I have to be. I mean, I just assume level design and game and UX design probably have a lot of similar psychology going into them.
We have a budding model. We've talked about it a little bit, maybe on our own show, and then we kind of tabled it because we started getting less and less academic. Again, we started like our first episodes are like, let's talk about like the 3 clue rule and these other kind of like patterns you can do around like
applied to
level design.
games. Yeah.
And then we got kind of tired, and then we started just chatting, and then we found we had a lot more fun doing that, and then we found we had a lot more fun like interviewing like other game creators and then just like milking them for information so we could do our own projects. But yeah, we actually have this kind of like model that we called like the player experience model, I think, and it had like I don't know, like there's like 13 or 14 at this point, little different dials and switches to craft like a game, like
The most usable game, the best game.
Yeah,
And where does it
that's what
rank?
yeah,
You know what I mean? So
it's like, are you like operator agnostic? Like, do you like allow your player to do whatever they want, or are you on the other end of that extreme? And there's all these different spectrums or whatever. And so we have a tendency to kind of like get academic, but then right now we kind of keep hitting this wall where like, we're tired of working. We want to have fun. We want to make things for ourselves. We want to make games. We want to make good games. We think we can make good games with practice, and doing it several times. And there's so much to learn. And so now like the show is that where now it's, hey, we are the newbies for like in this like field. We don't really know what we're doing. We're throwing in and we're learning from people around us. And that's become something that is super sustainable just in terms of like burnout, right? Like like we look forward to it, and it's also really enriching because like we talk to you guys and we talk to other folks who like give us ideas and direction, and then that lets us make something a little bit for ourselves that we probably couldn't do it without all of you guys. And so
I would
so
say
design
that-
thinking games is Forrest Gumped into what it is, but yeah.
yeah, its original title, like Design Thinking Games, like the audience, I definitely think has changed. And then, in regards to the academic and research of applied to gaming or the design thinking process, which is it's an actual process that they use in user experience and design management, which is like how do we creatively think through a problem, or how would we do this, or how would we as a group think together, like facilitate brainstorming to design think through a problem. But that applied to games was always the intent. So that is still the piece, but it's just other people have more interesting stuff to say than we do. I feel so we're just kind of definitely tired of hearing ourselves talk, and we've found out by changing just slightly just opening up and just inviting anyone in the gaming space in. People who set up arcades at game cons, people who run panels at cons, people who design their own games, people who produce games, people who design LARP, scenarios, people who all that stuff. We just kind of like, well, let's just open the floodgates. And so now we're kind of having to limit like how many episodes we do in a season and people, because there's just, it is work, as you know. So
Can you guys, for those at home who might not know, just explain what design thinking is as a concept?
Yeah. Do you want to go, Michael, or do you?
No,
I can
so
stab
on our
at it,
coins, like I'm more of an engineer. So Tim is literally like got like UX in his title. So go for it.
Okay. Yeah. So I will say there's a weird thing. So user experience, or like UX, or player experience, or PX, which is not a top popular acronym that anyone uses, but it's literally how do we make decisions on a product or game based on feedback from players, and then make it to like, oh, based on feedback, we're going to change this. And so it seems kind of intuitive, but then so that's UX, or player experience, or user experience. But a part of user experience is kind of, or a practitioner of it is design thinking, which is it's this nonlinear process. It focuses on a collaboration between all the people involved, but basically the makers of the product or the game and the people who are playing it, or the consumers or the users. And so it's like, how do we work together to make something phenomenal? How do we think together through a problem creatively? And how do we go through cycles of like designing, and by just kind of empathizing with what people or players want, defining it, and then, hey, does this work for you? Or would you expect this to be different? So it's that whole process, actually. And so it is a nonlinear design process for games or products that happen between the designer, if that's a dev, a graphic designer or game designer, whatever, and the player or the user. So we do it for products in our 9 to 5, designing software or designing services, but it's literally the same principles applied to game design exactly in every single way. And so when you I think one of the other people that we first started kind of interviewing was Dice Invasion. I don't know if you remember. We had her on our podcast. She is a user experience person who created a TikTok that's doing pretty well. And she was just like, hey, I'm just going to document my process as an academic UXer making a game with my child. Okay. And so she covers a lot on her TikTok.
That should be good.
A lot of those pieces. And so if you just search for Dice Invasion on TikTok, you'll find her. Okay. But then I would say that all of our early episodes of our season 1, maybe season 2 of our podcast, really go into that academically. And then we kind of start applying it to games as we go into season 2, 3, and 4.
Okay. No, that's amazing. And like, it makes total sense that you went from a UX design show to making a show that was like UX designing games, and then realizing that you kind of had already said everything, but then just opening it up and just taking in anybody and everybody. That's sort of like one of the philosophies we have here, and we want to get into the people who make all sorts of who played games in different ways. We have on the horizon an improv actor, and we want to talk to them about improv games that are played. So that's awesome. And you mentioned how the show has grown and changed. So you're coming up with another season. This is going to be what, season 4 that's coming out? What can we expect from season 4?
Season 4 is a lot of all of season 4. So our show is very curated. We try to cut it down to we talked about in the beginning that we wanted to just keep a tight 30-minute podcast because, and that's preferential.
We did
on our
how it slowly gets away from you, right?
Yeah, it does. Some of our episodes skew to 45 minutes or like an hour, but it's like we typically try to always keep it under 30 minutes because we kind of like that. Like, hey, I'm done in 15 or 30 minutes, and that's all we need. And so as we're applying that to season 4, we have a whole host of Twitch streamers, of board game designers, TCG game designers, and then a bunch of that are going to be hosts, and they're basically talking to them very similar to the style of this. It's like, hey, what was your background in gaming? How did you start getting into games or designing or streaming or putting on or creating a nonprofit for games, or you know, putting on your own convention, and then essentially just sharing that knowledge from the lens probably of, you know, kind of design thinking. So how is it helpful for other people? And so we have a lot of board game talk people in season 4, but then also Twitch streamers and some people that are for just board game designers that are that we've encountered, but then also people who run nonprofits for gamings, or people. So it's always like game space or game adjacent space. So
Nice. And it seems to me that that in talking about game design and bringing in the UX design and your love for games, you two, as you mentioned earlier, are now going into game design yourselves. Is that correct?
yeah, I would say there was a point where we talked to where Mike has ideas for games. I have
Yeah.
ideas for games. We have ideas together for games. More than one. We have a bunch of game ideas.
Okay.
You know, and so it's like, okay, so if you have a bunch of great ideas and they're all cool, how do we get something in front of someone, a prototype in someone, as quickly as possible, just to get feedback to see, you know? And so we've started that process 2 years ago. We have, like, I would say 2, 3, maybe 4-ish game ideas, or
Yeah.
I would just say games that we're working on. Some are in prototyping phases, some are in playtesting phases, and the furthest one along is probably Thirst, which is the one that we're going to try to kickstart this year.
Can I guess if that's about?
Vampire game.
I was about to say, I'm guessing it's about vampires. I'm seeing a theme here in y'all's loves and passions.
I will say that we tried to write a mission statement for our game studio, which we don't. We're like, is it Design Thinking Games, Design Thinking Game Studios? And it's like, oh, screw it, we're not changing the name. We'll just leave it. But like, for branding purposes. But
Yeah.
there's definitely this gothic punk dark core kind of, I feel like we have that aesthetic that we like. And so there's a game. Thirst is a 2 to 4 player Vampire versus Vampire City Dominion game. We have another game that I'm not going to share the title with, but it's basically Evil Librarian versus the kids and kind of game. And then there's solo games that Mike has. I have a bunch of games that I'm working on. I also collaborate with games with other people. Mike does games with other people. So it's really time, right? Because it's like you have a bunch of great ideas, and it would all be great to quit your 9 to 5 and just work on games. But it's really like, okay, how can we strategically, you know, get this game to the next level, into the next step, into the next step? And then there's other games that we're just moving. So we kind of have like this Kanban board, or like this, if you know what a Kanban board is, basically of like, okay, ideas, physical prototypes, play testing, alpha testing, blind play testing, and then, okay, then we're publishing. So we've got different stuff on that spectrum.
We can
We
use
need
one of
one of
those.
those.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Yeah.
We got
Megamall
the idea
Studios.
from 2 different game designers we interviewed, actually. We do it all the time in software. We use Kanban boards all the time. But someone we actually interviewed, Connor Wake, who's on our podcast. He's a great game designer. And he's also on TikTok. And he was like, oh, I just use a Kanban board. And we're like, for software? And he's like, yeah, it makes perfect sense. And so we started doing that. And I think it's helped a lot keep everything on track for us.
Very
love it.
good. Yeah. Okay, so you have a couple of different games and on the make. You said that's interesting because now I'm wondering, like, what is the theme for Danny and I? You know, if you guys are gothic, you know, vampiric, punk, you know, that sort of thing. I'm almost like I need to take it the 1,000 yards or the 1,000-mile view of like what Danny and I have planned and what we might be under. But I guess, yeah, okay, so you...
Some
like, why don't
people
you
are
walk-
very crazy. Just to interrupt you real quick, but some people are very crazy about that. They think like, oh no, your studio has to be very thematically related. All the games have to be of this certain feel, and it's just like, no, you can just publish under a different title, or you can just collaborate with a different person, or that product can be under a different thing. So if you want to make a cozy kawaii fun game and it doesn't mesh with your gothic punk 80s vampire game, it's fine, just put it under a different title. I don't think people care about that, but I will say game designers we've interviewed who don't self-publish, but they sell, you know, they design games but are published by other people. They say that is a serious thing that you have to have. If you do have like a studio or game design, you have to have kind of a feels or a theme, and that's what people know you for.
Oh,
So
darn. See, I was thinking our theme was just going to be great games. but maybe we need to.
You would
lock
think that
down.
would be enough, right?
Yeah, you would. Yeah, I was just going to be like, we're not going to publish bad games. Should that be enough? But I guess we'll need to go to the drawing board and see exactly what we got going for us. Fortunately, we only have one game right now, but it sounds like y'all are working on a few. Now, walk us through that process. I think the game designers who are in our audience might be interested to hear that process that you mentioned. What was it? Prototyping, playtesting. Just go through like what's on the Combine board and what does each process look like?
So a Kanban board is essentially just like columns, and it's how you sort work. And so you basically have all the columns that you want from left to right, and then you basically have titles for those columns, and then you have different cards that are in that column. And it's like, oh, so this is just an idea. I want to capture it on my phone or do something, and I just enter it. When you start thinking about it more, and it's like, oh, I'm going to start prototyping this or building something physical, or how would this work? Then there's like the next section is like, okay, idea, and then it's like, okay, how do we start to prototype it? And then once you have a prototype, it's like, is it functional? Is it broken? Can you actually play around and complete the game? And of course, there's always going to be play testing and improvement. But then after that, I would say, then it becomes like, oh, so okay, we're just like play testing hardcore. Then it's alpha testing, which is like, okay, the game's not broken. We're just trying to finish out all the little things, get the design right, just make sure the nuances are there. And for us, then the thing is, it's like, okay, now we think it's good. We're going to blind play test, and we're going to go ahead and send it to someone else and let them play and see if they can, or observe someone blind play testing a game. So you don't help them, but you see, can they teach themselves the game and can they play the game? And then after that, publishing of some form. Now, this is ours, and I don't know if it's necessarily right, but this is the one we're going by. If you talk to Hannah Struck, like for Trash Cult, she's like, no, we do blind play testing right after prototyping. And so it's like, okay. And she's like, no, you learn immediately what's wrong with it. And it cuts your time in half. And we were like, oh shit, maybe we should do that for our next game. So it's the thing is, it's your process, what works for you. So whatever your columns are, and as you're moving through that, what is your process? And so we're still figuring it out, but that's the one that we're following right now.
Yeah, I think there's probably validity to moving blind before alpha, or at the very least, maybe do a blind session and alpha play testing to tune everything up, and then another blind session once you feel like you got it there. But,
Hannah was just like, she knew specifically she wanted to do half the amount of time of development. She's like, I want to go faster, and so doing blind testing
on her first game
sooner was
just make sure we say that she wanted to do it twice as fast on her first time out.
Yeah.
I mean, very, very admirable, and I can't wait to get my hands on Trash Cult to see how it turned out. But it is, I was just jaw dropped when she said she'd done it in like 8 months, while Danny and I have been working on our game for like 18.
Yeah. It's impressive and effective and intimidating, but good. I'm actually happy for, and she's amazing. She shares all of her information, and so there's maybe a game that we thought of literally at PAX Unplugged last year, where it's kind of like a Regency era mech dating game, and I don't want to give too much away, but.
We should totally put it in the ether.
Yeah, we should definitely.
We're literally calling it Regency Mech.
Yeah.
And it's a Jane Austen mech warrior dating game, and it's amazing.
And
talk about
genre blending right there, folks. That I would never in a million years have gotten there.
But that one, we're like, oh shit, we should blind play test that one first. Make the change for that one and see if we can do it quicker. And so that's what we're thinking, at least. And that's all shout out to Hannah, because that was her,
And all I'm thinking about is Darcy, like getting, being introduced by getting out of a mech and just like, looking very dashing doing it.
Yes, exactly. It's so important that you present well at the occasional seasonal balls that you are able to have in such a such a small little gentry world, and you have to, like I mean,
you don't want to get ruined and be undateable, so don't have your reputation barred so Mr. Darcy won't date you,
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to that one. I guess my last question on the whole game making sphere is: are y'all planning on going to Kickstarter, or do y'all have another approach to how you want to get to publish? Are you going to self-publish, and if so, are you going to get Kickstarter to get the funds together, or what's your goal? If you want to say. If you don't want to say, we can cut this out.
Michael can take us.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the current idea is to get to Kickstarter. Currently, we're working with an awesome illustrator who is is basically helping us like create just enough material to have an attractive Kickstarter, so then we can like fully fund like the rest of the game.
Okay.
This isn't that, it's not that there aren't other options or whatever, but there's a point here where you probably get into just like analysis paralysis, right? And the goal is to get it into the world, and if it doesn't fund, cool, we'll figure out the next thing. One of the big takeaways that I have from this current season that we're working on now is really this idea of I don't know, like version lock-in, that your
Yes.
first version has to be like excellent, and that you can't just constantly iterate it. So we've already spent so many months or years like working on this game. Could it be better? Could it be more perfect? Like probably. But yeah, so right now the goal is to find the most direct, least cognitive load path to getting our game into many hands. That doesn't mean masses of hands, but like, you know, like being able to like afford to publish and bring it out to like different places. So right now Kickstarter, there's just the most information published or like available. Most of the people we talk to have experienced with that. And so we're really kind of glomping onto the experience of those who came before.
Wise men.
And yeah, but the goal is to crowdfund. We've already invested quite a bit. We're investing a little bit more just so that we have something that we think will sell well and market well on Kickstarter, with the idea that Kickstarter will hopefully fund the rest of it and maybe pay us back a little bit, but we're not really counting on that. We expect to lose money, but the goal is to kickstart.
Yeah.
Ideally, if we can hit all of our boxes, like this year.
Yeah,
Nice.
Hannah was basically like, no, you should shoot for the stars, cover all your costs, be prepared to make profit, put this much amount into marketing, you know, this, and it will happen. And I think our conversations where you introduced us to Jack Malacat, you know, from Serial Killer, and he was the idea is like, it doesn't have to be perfect out of the gate. I mean, you can do version 2, version 3, like what's the concern here, you know? So as long as it's not broken and people love it, why don't you get it out? And so his advice to us was like, after we come to talk to him about the game, showed him and everything, and he was just like, what are you waiting for? Kickstart it. So it's just like, okay, well, maybe we are doing analysis paralysis too much, and maybe we should, yeah.
It's so antithetical. I mean, you're building something physical. You guys know, and it has to feel right. It has to feel good. But we are, you know, you could publish another version really quickly, feasibly, right? And so it's just kind of like a different way to think that like some of these other folks have done it with some success, and it's scary. I don't like the idea of like a version 1 that sucks, that even exists, right? However, I do like the idea of like memento mori. Life is short. We might get hit by a bus tomorrow. Why not publish today, right? Like you can't have a legacy if you don't start putting it out there.
And start putting the library game out there. Start putting the Regency Mech game out there. Start putting like just,
Yeah. No, I mean, like, well, Danny and I only have one game so far, and I don't know where it stands on the like kind of like early prototype versus super well polished, but we're probably leaning more towards like we perfected the game before we put it out there. But I do understand, and I would like to in the future go more rapidly to market with something that's a little rougher, because even if it's rough, like the people will love the fact that they have the rougher copy when the second iteration comes out and it's more polished.
yeah.
That's the idea, but don't you know, like as an outsider, you know, don't provide yourselves too many caveats. Like I think if Tim and I could choose, we would go the path that you have taken, and have like a really amazing professional prototype, a flourishing community of people who like your game before it's even out and available. I mean, that's really the way to go, and that seems like the best ladder for like success. Again, like I think the other thing is like what we've discovered is like everyone has their own pub. Like some people have game studios, but most people are just like two dudes and dudettes, two people, 3 people figuring out how to just make something because their 9 to 5 is not scratching that creative itch for them. And Tim and I have a chip on our shoulder. We want to have something that exists, and that's not just for us. Like, you know, like some people don't write. Some people write stories just for themselves. Other people write stories so that they are read, right?
Yep.
And so for us, you know, we only have so many hours per week that we can even work with each other.
Yeah.
And so if we really wanted to go for perfection, like we'd be doing this for another like 10 years or something. So we're just kind of, we're going to die before we get it out. And so we're going to, that's kind of like our thinking here, you know?
Yeah, and we definitely want to. We both also have worked for tech, Fortune 500, just like software, and I can definitely say that I'm tired of my creativity being sucked out of my brain by corporate America because they need it, and I would rather have that creativity. At this point in my life, I would rather put my creativity in making my own things, and man, the appeal of a physical job right now or a mindless job and just saving my creativity for that is so appealing. I don't know if you feel that way at all, but it's like that's
100%.
legit how I feel. Yeah.
Yeah, it's challenging to have to spend 8 hours sinking yourself into something you're less passionate about than game design. So
Yeah.
right there with you.
It's one of those things they often say that you're, even if you get a job in your passion, you're still going to have to deal with the boring bits. But at the end of the day, especially for me, it's like there's a big difference between having to go through a big boring bit or a grueling project when the outcome is something that I love and will stand behind versus when I have a very trash day and all I can think is, wow, I got that pizza out to people. Whew, fun.
I feel like it's always time, right? You're trading time, your time for money. And so I'm just now acutely aware of like what it takes to create a product and publish a game and get it out there. And I was just like, okay, I want to do more of that. I definitely want to set up this for my retirement or my side hustle or hopefully a full-time job. And I don't have to do this anymore. So that is definitely the goal. It's for us. And so we definitely are serious about it and want to pursue it. And I would love to be a full-time game designer. That would be amazing.
It's coming.
Yeah. All of us here at this, in this record, that's like our goal. Well, I think that's a great place to end our interview on. And thank you two so much for being here, of course. But now Danny has a quick little lightning round for you. Danny, do you want to explain how this works?
Sure. Yeah. I have a feeling that y'all will be masters of the lightning round by now. I have a feeling you've had many experiences with this sort of thing. So our lightning round is called 8 to rate, underrated or overrated lightning round. So we're going to give you 8 different topics, and you have to tell us very quickly whether they are underrated or overrated, and just briefly why. So you guys can take a turn at this. So I don't know who wants to go first. Who's
Are
going to
all
be the
four of us doing this, or just us two?
just you two. So we'll give you one thing, and then you can give us your take on each of them. All right. So this one Joel is forcing me to do because I have no idea what it means. But Thaco. Overrated or underrated Thaco?
You can tell these.
I'm going to say underrated, right? Look, okay. So, like, everyone loves having, like, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Everyone can come in and play. But, look, if you are really walking around in armor, you have to care very deeply about your layers. Do you have your, like, Gambion underneath your plate and stuff like that? And Thaco, like, THAC 0, I believe, Tim, like, you're covering your face and, like, is like just like a really hardcore like artifact from like 3.5 something like that. It's really that's it. I feel like underrated. Like everyone wants like an easy game now, and now I feel like let's make the game like tough.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I would also go underrated because I think it's math. I'm sorry, but if you don't like RPGs, I mean, the old school shit was all on tables and it was all math, and it was to hit armor class 0, it was all negative and you had to do it. But I mean, it helped people understand the flip side when you're actually doing the positive now in 3 and 5th edition. So underrated.
Okay.
Okay. Sweet. Number 2, Dragonborn,
The D&D race.
the D&D race, as I'm told.
Overrated. I just don't. How much special power
Totally
do you need?
overrated.
Yep. And
Yeah, it's super impractical too. Like I don't think you can actually like walk around like upright with like a kind of like amphibian bone structure and like all of these scales. Like I like fucking hate the Dragonborn.
All right. No.
I was just going
Number-
to say it's so funny
yeah.
because I would have played a Dragonborn on my first session, but I also totally understand, especially as high fantasy haters. It totally makes sense because they're the most high fantasy, like ridiculously high fantasy race.
Yeah.
Now, Dragonborn and Skyrim, though, underrated.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually like Dungeons and Dragons Second Edition. Actually had Worm, and you could actually play dragons as a class. It's like, don't screw around with playing Dragonkin is what they called it back in the day, or Dragonborn. It's like, no. I mean, you can just be a dragon. That's a game. Okay, so you don't need to be a hybrid. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Question number 3. Pathfinder or any other non-D&D TTRPG game systems?
Underrated. I think
Super underrated. I'm sorry, like D&D is not the best one out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones. There's a one out there where you play raccoons as a role-playing game, flying a ship. Like there's space, playing White Wolf, like other ones. But I would say like D&D was the first, and much like Critical Role, that doesn't mean it's Blade Runner, the TTRPG, Alien, the TTRPG. There's like a lot of other options. It doesn't have to always be Dungeons and Dragons.
All right. Number 4. Having a podcast.
Overrated.
Super overrated. Yeah.
Agreed.
Just
All
the
right.
work, as you know, it's great.
As you
It's
know.
great, but if you could just like throw the work to someone else to do, it's like here, I have tons of money to throw you to make our podcast or episode. That would be great. But
It used to be a differentiator, but now you're like, you say like, I have a podcast, and then everyone else in Starbucks also looks at you, and you're like, us too.
Yeah, exactly. There was a heyday where it was like a feather in your cap, and now it's almost like a requirement for living.
Yep. All right. Number 5. Under or overrated D12s?
I feel like we're thinking about this like far too hard.
yeah, I would say overrated. I've never found there's maybe a handful of weapons that ever use a freaking D12. I don't understand why having it apart from just having it. The classic 7 that everyone's used to, like a 4, a 6, an 8, a 10, a 12, a 20. You know what I mean? It's just like I don't even know why the 12's in there. But
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's like it's a way to gatekeep a little bit from people who could just have like 2d6s,
we actually have a game on our podcast called D12 where we randomly ask 12 questions to people and they roll dice. So I shouldn't have said that.
No, the hilarious thing is that's exactly what they were talking about. They weren't talking about the dice. They were just talking about like our little like game.
Sorry, sarcasm was lost on me.
I put it in there because of your game, but I wanted you to talk about the dice itself because I'm kind of with you, Tim. It's like there's 2d6 for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Number 6. Going with your gut.
Underrated. People should trust their instincts more, and I think people's instincts are out of whack most of the time. And if you actually are more in tune with yourself and your instincts, they will always guide you correctly.
Yeah, my inclination is to say overrated, but Tim is my conscience, and so he often I prefer to think tactically about just about everything, and Tim often tells me that that's wrong. So I think I would my inclination is to say overrated, but it's probably super underrated.
Okay. Should we start calling you Timothy Cricket?
Oh my god. Yes, please.
Tiny Tim. I actually had that nickname in college, Tiny.
I gotcha.
Number 7. Appalachia.
Underrated. Because I live in it.
Underrated. Yeah. I mean, like I'm in Florida, so like I look at Appalachia like, oh my God, you guys have haints and you have like all this other cool like cryptid things, and you guys just had like the epicenter of like an earthquake that hasn't like shaken since like before the Americas were formed. It's cool, man.
Appalachian
Super
Trail.
cool.
I would love to be able to walk it in my life, but I don't have 6 months to spare.
Aw.
We have the best resources. It's the oldest forest. That's why it's constantly mined for fossil fuels and natural gas and everything. It's just old as hell. So that's why they have like tons of cryptids and weird, creepy ghost holler stories and like all that shit. So I think it is. Also, it's really a diverse group of people. Most people think hellbillies, you know what I mean? But West Virginia has, which is in Appalachia, has the highest number of trans youth than any state.
Oh, wow.
And then, we actually have a very diverse state, and there's lots of weird stuff in Appalachia. There's all these little weird, quirky festivals and backwood places and myths and legends, and it's, I think, definitely underrated.
Sounds like heaven for Danny.
Not enough like content either. Like the old gods of Appalachia is like an audio drama that's amazing, and I think it's now an RPG that they just kickstarted earlier like this year or last year. I think it was at PAX U, the old gods of Appalachia. Not enough content there. I would love more. I'm sure there's a saturation point. I'm sure, but cool, so cool.
Well, it sounds like we need to do Appalachia Trail series so that we can justify taking 6 months to do it and creating a bunch of content.
There you go.
Go look for some cryptids. I'm in for it. Just bring a hammer.
I think Danny
Why
was-
is my mom constantly calling my name out here?
Oh, God.
That's just the
not your
Wendigo.
mom.
Don't worry about it. It's just the Wendigo.
It's just the Wendigo.
You're not even supposed to say that word, Tim. It's like you're literally in West Virginia right now. What are you thinking?
I have a security system in my house. We're good.
All right, last one. Being a Florida man.
Or maybe the myth.
I mean, it's super overrated. Like as one, the only reason Florida Man gets all this love, let me rephrase. The only reason that Florida Man gets all of this attention is because Florida has like incredibly strict sunshine laws.
Yes.
So that everything has to be like publicly available. I guarantee, like if other states had that, you would have your own kind of batshit like emerging from each state.
Oh, I'd be a Texas man right here.
Undoubtedly.
Keep that that sheet, behind public all locked up. My rap sheet.
I actually don't have a response to that one because I have no idea what a Florida man, being a man in Florida is like, or who the Florida man is. So I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, like earlier this year, like in January, you had frozen iguana hazards, right? Because if you iguanas go dormant when it's cold out, and they live in the trees, and every so often they'll fall out of the trees frozen, and they'll hit you, and they're huge, and that'll hurt. And
Wait, is this in America or is this Australia?
Yeah, this is no, and we have there's a python in our neighborhood that was just found a few weeks ago, and so. Yeah, I mean, so you have all of this stuff because of invasive species. Florida being what it is, our governor decided to attack Disney.
Yeah.
And we have all these people who have tigers and then decide to let them go. Crazy. And then that plus sunshine state laws, just is kind of an amalgamation of weird. And people don't really realize how huge Florida is too. So there's just
enormous.
a lot of bullshit from north to south that there's just a lot of fodder, and but you hear about it because of those legal requirements.
Insightful. Well, thank you so much for playing 8 to Rate. That was fantastic. So, Joel, I will turn it back over to you as I am obligated to do so since you claimed you're the host.
Yeah, I claimed that very early, and I'm so happy about it. Well, Danny, why don't you, really quick, we talked about a lot there, and you were definitely keyed in on that conversation, writing notes as we went along. What did you take away? What was your key takeaway from Tim and Michael here?
Honestly, it's one of our favorite topics, iteration. I think that almost anything is achievable if you have an iteration mindset and you're going to try to go step by step. I think establishing feedback loops is also something that I think was sort of implied throughout. Is it's important to not only be able to try to achieve something, but to have ways to measure it and sources to measure the data that is going to inform whether or not you were successful. So I think that's kind of one of the key cores to design thinking. And I think that Tim and Mike have been amazing pioneers of bringing this sort of thinking to game design and really making people think consciously about applying some of these principles from outside of game design to game design to great effect. So that's my key takeaway from today's conversation.
Well, folks at home, if you love that takeaway, if you loved this conversation, well, I have something to ask from you right now. If right now that you are sitting in front of your computer, you are on your phone, you are listening to us somehow and within reaching distance to your device, reach out to that device, take the mouse, click the screen, and go and hit that like button and get that confetti. It has to be released. You have to drain that confetti from the like button, otherwise it'll build up and it'll pop. So you're doing YouTube a favor by liking our video and getting that confetti out of the like button. But don't stop there, because we need you. You're already on your device. I already got you on your hand on your phone, on your hand on your mouse. Just saunter over to that subscribe button and hit it like you've never hit anything else before. I'm not even sure what I could describe it. Hit it like a piñata. That's what I would say. If you haven't had a piñata in your adult life, do it. Go and get one and get your buddies together and get rowdy with a piñata, because you're going to have yourself a blast, just like you're going to have a blast hitting that subscribe button. And once you do that, it's just one more thing I have to ask for you. And please, oh please, just hit that bell, because we're going to give you a ring-a-ding-ding when it is hot and fresh podcast time right out the oven. If you've done those 3 things for us, we really greatly appreciate it. You might as well take the time to leave a comment. Something in this episode must have inspired you to think. And why don't you say those thoughts out loud in our comment section? And if you love podcasts and you have friends who love podcasts, but they don't watch on YouTube, feel free to recommend us on any of their podcatching apps. We are actually becoming a bigger audio podcast than a video podcast right now, and they can surpass us on the audio side. So go to Apple Podcasts, go to Spotify, go to Pocket Cast, wherever you get your podcast or wherever your friends get your podcast, they can find us under the Mega Moth Studios super secret podcast. But wait, I told you not to tell anybody about it. What are you doing telling people about it? See? Yeah. Say yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Joel.
Hey, Danny.
Hey, I got a question for you.
Oh, you remind me of right now.
Really, huh?
Yeah,
There's a lot of beeping at the beginning of this promo.
Yeah, he starts with questions. That's where things begin.
I usually end with questions.
Oh no.
Yeah, we'll get there. Don't worry. What are you doing May 24th through the 26th?
I'm not sure if I'm doing anything productive. Maybe sitting on my bed, looking at the ceiling. Turning my lights so that the stucco on the ceiling looks like constellations. I can find things in it.
That sounds terrible, but the good news is you don't have to do something so terrible that weekend if you're cool.
Well, how could I be cool?
Well, it's very simple. You got to come to Houston and go to Comicpalooza 2024.
The Comicpalooza 2024. Why ever would I come all the way to Houston to go to such an event?
John Cena. John Cena's going to be there.
John Cena? Wow.
John Cena.
That guy's big.
He's so big, man. He's huge.
Wow.
Huge guy. Big boy.
I don't know if I've seen a guy that big before.
Marshmallow Man.
Marshmallow? Who? John Cena?
No, there's that. You're saying you hadn't ever seen anyone that big before. I was reminding you of the Marshmallow Man from first Ghostbusters movie.
Well, we'll see if John Cena can compete with that. That's a big guy. But was he human? I don't know. The lore is confusing.
Guess who else is going to be there?
I don't know. Oh, man, Danny. My mom?
No, Oscar, Creed, and David Wallace from The Office. And I really enjoy The Office, and I identify with Creed Bratton as just a human. So I think that's really cool.
That is. I don't know which one of those I would identify with most, but I do love all of them.
Do you want to know the coolest part about Comicpalooza 2024?
Yeah, I do. I really do, because you've almost convinced me to go for some reason, but I still am not convinced 100%.
There is going to be a special event with a special stage that you will be invited up onto to have your face tattooed in the middle of a live broadcast of your face being tattooed.
I don't know if I want that part, Danny. Why would I ever do that?
So basically, I'll take that as yes, sign me up. And guys, come to Comicpalooza 2024. You can be as excited as Joel is right now to participate in his face tattoo panel. And we would love to meet you if you're there in the vicinity and are inclined to, come over. Comicpalooza is huge. We went in 2023 and it literally changed our lives. So we're definitely going in 2024, whether or not, Joel knows it. This is going to be a really good thing for him.
Well, I think so. So, Danny, are they going to be able to meet us at Comicpalooza 2024?
If they can find us.
Okay. Are we going to be performing a show at Comicpalooza 2024?
Yeah, we are. We're going to be doing a show. Some people might call it a sideshow. Other people call it a podcast. But we're going to be doing it in front of like a live audience.
And
there are going to be people there, supposedly.
And if they want to, will they be able to play X Seekers of Fortune and get their firsthand experience with our new strategy card
so
game?
much X Seekers of Fortune. You wouldn't even believe how much X Seekers of Fortune people are going to be able to play. We're going to be in that special room where people can come and play games, and it's free. It's walk up. You don't have to sign up or anything. You just sit down at the play mat, shuffle up the cards, and you are going to get to play whether you know how to play or not. We've got people to teach you. It's going to be cool. It's going to be cool. It's going to be cool.
John Cena, a live show with my face being tattooed and X Seekers of Fortune being played. Darn, Danny, I guess I got to make plans for the 24th through the 26th of May. I'm going to make plans to be at the George R. Brown Convention Center Memorial Day weekend, so that way I can get my face tattooed.
You better. I'm not going to get my deposit back on that tattoo artist.
Okay. All right. Well, folks, leave a comment below as to what you think I should get on my face.
Yeah. Something large. And, we were talking a little bit earlier about how we don't know exactly what the theme of the games that would sort of tie together everything we do as a game studio, but we do know what the theme of our podcast is, and that is being unhinged. So we are going to play a very special game that I think you guys are going to really enjoy. Now, this game is something of a role-playing game. I think you guys will enjoy it. You will be playing Podcast Detectives, and I'm going to read you the setup right now. So here we go. All right. I want you to both pretend. Pretend.
Wait, are those your Eclipse glasses, Danny?
No, these are not Eclipse glasses. These are my special glasses so I can read the contents of my top secret notebook here. You can't read it because you're not wearing the special glasses. I can read it because I am. So, also, everything is very red right now. So, all right. Anyway, here we go. Here's the setup. I want you both to pretend you are podcast hosts who have had your show hijacked by a maniacal producer who has booked your show with 3 very unusual guests and left you with the following menacing instructions. Hello, Tykel and Mimothy. Let's play a game. Today, I have booked you 3 guests, but you cannot know anything about them in advance. When each guest comes on the show, they will make a brief introduction, and then you will each be able to ask them 2 questions. Once they have answered their questions, the next guest will come on and you will repeat the process. Once all 3 guests have been interviewed, you will have to reveal to the audience what you think the secret theme was that tied all 3 guests together. Guess correctly and all will be right with the world. But guess incorrectly and every koala bear on the planet and Joel will be forced to eat eucalyptus until their extinction. All right. Yeah, perfect. You guys ready to play?
I didn't realize I was part of the threat, the consequences.
Oh, you're always part of the threat. Yeah.
All right.
I am going to send you, Joel, the first one. Joel will be the guest. So here we go.
Okay. Or I'm going to be, so I play the guest. Okay.
Yes. So Joel will introduce himself, and then you will have an opportunity to ask him 2 questions each, and
my
then
God.
we'll move on to the next guest.
Sent me a synopsis from the back of a book. Okay, let's see. Do I get to say my name?
Yeah, you read the whole thing.
Oh, okay, I read this. Okay, cool. So I guess I'll just read it cold. My name is Bartholomew Garbage Patch, and I hail from the fine state of disgrace. When I was a child, I became renowned across my country for my uncanny ability to perfectly mimic and the mating sounds of a variety of local fauna. I became so disruptive to our local ecosystem that a certain unnamed government agency had me treated chemically speaking. What do you mean? Had me treated chemically speaking, if you catch my meaning. And now I'm left wandering the great American prairies with a little more than my name and then a few kinky parlor tricks and a lifetime ban from petting zoos.
Okay. So, any questions here for
I wish
him,
I'd read it.
gentlemen?
I wish I knew which way it was going because I would have put on a different affect.
So 1 question for me, 1 for Mike, or 2 each?
2 each.
Oh, okay. I'm going to ask. So does he have the answers to these questions, or?
No, he's completely in the dark.
I was going
Oh.
to say, am I improving or are you feeding me?
You're improving, yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Cool.
okay. What is it? Why did you get banned from petting zoos?
Let's just say that there's a fine line. It might be a gray line, but there's a fine line between good pets and great pets.
Okay. Second question. You said you had a few kinky tricks as you walk through the Wild West. What are those?
I'll show you sometime.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. All
I'm
right.
curious what your favorite fauna mating sound is. As in my notes, I was like, favorite fauna mating sound. Answer: whoa, 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 whoa.
I hope that got you, boiling there under the collar.
Okay.
What states border the state of disgrace?
Oh, there's shame, disappointment, and exclusion.
Okay. Well, those were your 2 questions. So we've got our first guest. Thank you, Mr. Bartholomew Garbage Patch, for stopping by and talking to us about your animal mating call.
Fauna mating call. It's not animals, it's plants.
That's fair. Okay. Let's bring out the next guest.
I'm just going to try to, see. My name is Ralph No Hands, and I don't have any hands. People used to make fun of me for growing up because I have no hands. But look at me now, still with no hands. None of this would have been a problem except a certain unnamed government agency accused me of dumping massive amounts of animal aphrodisiacs into my local water supply with the use of, you guessed, my hands. Obviously, the joke was on them because I have no hands. But unfortunately for me, they were able to prove in court of law that I do in fact have hands. Thus, the name change to Ralph Some Hands.
Okay. Well done. Mike, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Sorry.
Well, you haven't seen a guy with no hands before?
God, I'm awful. I'm like, so when you have no hands and you're angry, what do you throw? If not hands.
Well, Mike, I could still pick things up. What are you, some sort of discriminator? I could still grab things with these nubs, and I could still toss them far. Plus, I could throw stumps. Been known to do it before, and I'll do it again. Get too mouthy with me.
What state was the main water supply where you dump the aphrodisiacs?
I wanted to do as much damage as possible, so I was up in the Great Lakes, so Illinois, Michigan.
You son of a bitch. I'm from Michigan. I was like, no.
Yes.
No.
And I'm glad I did it. I do it again. Yeah, see?
Why were you putting aphrodisiacs for animals in the water supply in Michigan?
This garbage guy told me that he knew a few kinks, and I was going to be helping him out with those.
And then can you tell me more about, is there a name to this unnamed government agency? What information do you have?
Oh, they're just real. You know what? You might as well call them the nosy Nellies because they're just all up in people's business. I guess you could call them the NNLs, for nosy, not going to let you go. See?
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Ralphie Some Hands. I appreciate you stopping by. We're here with
That's
our
slander.
final
I'm
guest.
still no hands.
Okay. Here we go. Last one.
Oh my god. What is this? Oral response. All right, My name is Greagle the Beagle, and I have an unhealthy relationship with cream cheese. Let's just say that if you leave me alone with dairy aisles, there's going to be a mess, just a big, gloppy mess. For that reason, I am no longer allowed at any of my local grocery stores. To get even the grocery store cartel, to get even with the grocery store cartel, I devised a secret way to hypnotize cows into thinking they were different cows. So now, of them, I would respond to the right name. So none of them would respond to the right name. It didn't work. No worries, though. I have a foolproof way to improve my system using a complex array of magnets, refrigerators, and for refrigerator magnets. I'm seeking $1 million in exchange for a 10% stake in my dairy cow hypnosis scheme.
Okay.
So what do you boys say? $1 million?
Tim, we'll start with you.
Okay. I would. Why are you trying to hypnotize cows again?
So none of them would respond to the right name. The cow, you have to be real gentle with it, and you got to be saying its name real nice like. And if you don't know its name, or it doesn't know its name, you ain't getting no milk.
So, I'm assuming that there's a relationship between the dairy aisle and the cows. So, can you tell me more about the mafia that you're talking about?
The dairy mafia, the guys who get together and they milk all those cows and they keep all that sweet milk to themselves. Those greedy sons of bitches. And they won't liberate it. And I liberate the milk from the dairy aisle, specifically the cream cheese.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, did your plan involve dumping chemicals into the water supplies?
No, I don't believe so. It was a secret, though. I can't be going around telling you. But it was a secret that involved me making the cows not remember their name.
Okay. Second question.
I feel like my second question and last question is like existential. So you're Griggle the Beagle, and the cows couldn't remember their names. Are animals sentient in this world? Are you an animal?
To be fair, Griegel mispronounced. His name is actually Gregel the Bagel,
Gregel the Bagel.
I understand.
but he's having some issues with his name.
It's like all the animals are alive.
I'm just,
I mean, I guess the animals were alive,
this
right?
guy just, fed me lines to say, just like off the cuff. How am I supposed to control mispronouncing things with a cold read?
It's fair. Okay. Did you have an actual answer to that, Joel? I mean, Gregel the Bagel. Gregel the Bagel?
My answer is also very existential because I have no idea who I am aside from these paragraph that was given to me right before we started. I came into existence a mere 2 minutes ago.
And he's a bagel.
And he's a bagel.
And it turns out I'm a bagel who loves his cream cheese. I just love to slather that on me.
Okay.
So,
All right, excellent.
Well, thank you, Gregel. You can see yourself out. So, gentlemen, now the fate of the world rests in your hands. What is the common thread between the three guests today? You can each take a guess. Let's
Are we allowed to discuss amongst each
yeah,
other?
discuss
before
amongst
making a guess?
yourself. Let's have a discussion here.
There seems to be definitely 3 people who have gotten caught for trying to make inappropriate behavioral modifications with animals for I don't know, potentially weird or sexual reasons, and they've been caught or found out by different agencies. That's what I'm seeing as the comment.
I think they're the same agency, right? Like I think it's this kind of grocery store cartel, the unnamed government agency that's going around. If there was a narrative here, I think Gregel did something so that inspired Ralph No Hands.
Yeah. Ralphie No Hands.
He got the grocery store cartel to get Ralph No Hands to dump a whole bunch of chemicals into the water supply for some inane purpose that ultimately made like all of the animals like super like
Which had the first guy actually do something inappropriate at a petting zoo.
Yeah, exactly. yeah. That poor guy at the end is just a victim, really. I feel like we might be taking this in like a totally. There's probably like a very obvious answer that we're totally failing at.
Is that your final
common
answer?
denominator.
You got.
Oh shit.
No, you're good. Keep going. Common
So
denominator.
it sounds like my answer is that they all have in common that they're trying to drug animals to have sex with them or something of inappropriate nature and have got caught. You
I would
actually
never.
saying
Yeah.
that they are
Well,
dependent on each other, that they actually are sequential or have affected each other that way.
Look, humans want to see patterns where they may not exist. Like I think my hardcore answer is like, well, the common denominator between them is this unnamed government agency, which I think is the grocery store cartel. I don't know how to take it. I don't know how to play.
Yeah,
That's fair.
That's it.
No, I mean,
Well,
this is a nebulous game.
I'll just say, gentlemen, I don't know either.
Okay. So do we have?
Ralph No Hands seems to be a human, but like Gregel is a bagel.
Well,
Anyway, yeah. Anyway, I got you. Yep. All right.
I mean, it's hard to say. Obviously, is he a bagel? Is he just somebody who really likes cream cheese?
No, I'm a bagel for sure. I
Okay.
spread that cream cheese all over me.
There you go.
So yeah, I think that's both of our guesses or like our thoughts of the connections. What is
Okay. So so we can summarize this as being, a variety of individuals who are trying to do unsavory things with animals, while also somehow associated with a shady government agency / grocery cartel.
my thought? And then I think Mike's
Yeah.
is the maybe.
You know, when you say it like
It's
when you say it like that,
It's
it all
the
makes sense.
it's corporate oligarchy polluting nature.
Guys, you got it
Can we
80% correct. That's
Can we
80%.
ask the unhinged
Yeah.
producer, you, questions?
Sure, go for it. Yeah, I can answer a few.
Why did you book these people? What did you think our podcast was about?
Well, I wanted to get some really important information out into the world about the dangers of just letting animals do their thing. Yeah.
I have a question, Danny.
no,
And this is actually a question
producer.
for everybody. Did I misremember the meaning of the word fauna? I thought fauna was plants.
No, that's flora.
is plant.
Yeah, that's flora and fauna.
Yeah. So fauna is the animals.
Yes.
There are also
Okay.
two of the fairies that are in.
The next one
Sleeping
that'll
Beauty.
like rack your brain is flotsam and jetsam.
Yeah. Can you go into that?
Me?
Not you. I mean, I don't think
Obviously.
You
Danny, you know me. You
Flora
know
and fauna
these are the
down.
first times I've heard those words before.
would. What's flotsam and jetsam? I know it's a magic card now.
They're the two eels, aren't they? That are Ursula's.
Oh yeah.
No. Sorry, Lorcana. My bad. I'm sorry.
No apologizing. You're good.
Do they have a difference? Is one like floating and one is submerged or something? Is there a difference between float and submerged?
Yeah, I actually had to look it up. Yeah, so flotsam refers to goods sunken from, flotsam refers to goods from a sunken vessel that have floated to the surface of the sea, or any floating cargo that is cast overboard. Jetsam designates any cargo that is intentionally discarded from a ship or wreckage. Legally, jetsam also floats. But floating is not part of the etymological meaning.
So they both float, but one was sunken first. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, like flotsam is like, oh no, like my thing fell overboard, and jetsam is like, yes, my thing went overboard. So there you go.
There you go. All right. Any other questions or?
No, I'm curious what the 20% rest is. So
Oh, they all have to do with Joel's secret desires. So that's it. You guys did really well. You got 4 out of 5 points. Joel, you got 0 points. So
nice.
only you will have to
Okay.
eat the eucalyptus.
I didn't realize I was playing. I thought I was just a humble actor in this
Oh,
this charade.
You're always playing, Joel. Playing
All
games.
right.
Yep.
Well, our winners today are Tim and Michael of the Design Thinking Games podcast. Thank you so much for being with us here on the Megamoth Studios Super Secret podcast. So, gentlemen, I always like to ask, where do you want to be found?
I would say you can search for designthinkinggames.com is our website, or search for Design Thinking Games on Instagram or TikTok.
Okay, excellent. Is there any personal accounts y'all like to have followed? Oh yeah, also Michael, you have one to plug as well.
No, I was like, I want to hear like Tim's personal accounts that we should follow as well, if any.
Don't have to.
Okay, it's like
Plug the
yeah,
thief.
So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. It's like so since Tim takes the liberty of like plugging the one project I'm a part of, there's a couple of other things that I'm really putting some like muscle behind that I would love to find an audience for if it's the listener's thing. The first is The Thief. Season 2 is in production. It's going to take forever, but it's going to come out this year. It's thiefpodcast.com. It's won some awards. It charts somewhere like right now in Norway. It's number 47 on the science fiction list.
Nice.
It is it's an actual play, but more as if like how it's supposed to have actually happened, like in our imaginations. Full cast, fully paid cast, something I like to kind of like throw out there because sometimes it's like an ethical choice, and it's a passion project. But the other thing that is really new for me, but we're starting to put out some teasers and content for, is that I've written a comic with the artist Isabella Duffels, and it's set in the same world as The Thief, and it's called Swan, like the bird. Swan comic. Swan.substack.com is like where I'd love for folks to go. There's like, we're talking, it's kind of the same thing we're doing with the Design Thinking Games, where we're figuring this out as we go. We're trying to learn from smart people, but we just decided to throw in. And so I'd love to find an audience for people who love human illustrated comics. So between that and The Thief, yeah, that's it. I'm all over the internet in a professional sense. If people care, so I'm Googleable. But I'd rather start disassociating from my 9 to 5, right, and start making art and stuff. So I'd love for encouragement in the form of like followers.
Yeah. Subscribe, follow, listen. Those
We'll
things
add those
mean
links
a
in
lot.
the show notes, right, Joel? Is that a thing that we do on our podcast?
What, like tell people to like and subscribe?
No. Just share the links of the things that our guests are promoting. That's like a thing that we do.
Yes, yeah. Check the show notes on the episode. No matter where you're looking at it, check in those show notes. You can find The Thief and Design Thinking Games podcast. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Danny, where can people find us, and what do we have to tell the people?
Well, I think that don't we have like something that we just automatically cut in that tells them where to find us? Did you record that like at some point?
I don't know. I mean, usually we say you can find us if you're watching on YouTube. You can find us on all these links that you see to the side of the page.
Well, on TikTok we're at Megamoth Studios.
Yeah.
And on Instagram we are x_seekers_fortune. _of_fortune and X Seekers of Fortune on Facebook, but we just launched our Board Game Geeks page for X Seekers of Fortune. So if you have played X Seekers of Fortune, we would really appreciate it if you went over to our X Seekers of Fortune Board Game Geek page and left your feedbacks and a rating. It helps us a lot with finding new players for the game. So let us know what you think. We would greatly appreciate it.
Yes.
And we will be at Geeked Out on April 20th in Burleson, Texas. Is that something you wanted me to say, Joel, or is that still too secret?
No,
Didn't we
that's
say
not
that last episode?
Yeah, it's not secret at all. Please
Okay.
join us at Geek Out in Burleson, Texas on April 20th. I think we're going to be there. We're planning on being there from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. But we could always end up staying a little later if the games are going good. And we're also going to be at Comicpalooza this year.
Comicpalooza.
Yes, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about that in the coming episodes. So just sit back, relax, and learn all about Comicpalooza and what we're planning on doing there. But I think that was an episode. This has been Danny. I have been Joel, reminding you that you must start somewhere. So why not here? Thanks for listening. Theme music by James Hilden, produced and edited by William Wymore.
I personally would start with the Design Thinking Games podcast.